Hello, and welcome to Political Science 101 online. This is the history of the American political system. Today we're talking about Chapter 4, Civil Liberties. And the next chapter that we're going to talk about is civil rights or equal rights. And you might think to yourself, okay, what is the difference? So it's really important that we understand the difference. And I love that this chapter of our new textbook talks about that pretty quickly in the first few pages. You might be reading online. I do have a hard copy, which is really nice to have both. Oops, sorry. Okay. So, civil liberties really is specific individual rights that are constitutionally protected, okay? And many of them are from the Bill of Rights, and it also goes into the 14th Amendment, which was an amendment adopted after the Civil War, during the Civil War, to protect newly freed slaves. So these are basic individual rights, and civil rights is more about protecting the minority. And why is that a thing? Because when this country was founded, those separatists that came over, those Puritans that came over, they were minorities, and they were persecuted because they were considered to be radicals and not part of the mainstream. And so, that vibe has kind of woven itself through American history. Although oftentimes we hear crazy things like, oh, why do minorities need to be protected? Well, that's really how this country was founded. And what I love about your first chapter that we have that we've read is when there is a majority, they often in world history, and our founders knew this, take over to the point that they want to stamp out any other group that is a minority, and they did not want that to happen. Okay, they wanted this to truly be a land of freedom and equality. Are we there yet? No. Have we made great strides? Sure. Do we need to continue to move towards equality and democracy? That's what democracy actually is. It's an equalization. Yes, we do. Okay, we are not there yet. Okay, so that's sort of the difference. So civil liberties is like the basic rights. And I was going to read the Bill of Rights so that you know what those are. Like fair trial and that sort of thing. Where sometimes, and your book is really good about sometimes where the U.S. really messed up, or where the Supreme Court made some rulings that were not in line with this at all. And some of those are Japanese internment camps, how the Native Americans were treated, especially, when this country was founded. They were, definitely, there were people here. I'm pretty sure your book states that there were, was it 8 to 10 million Native Americans? And with all the different things, persecutions, just slaughtering people if they did not want to become Christians, and smallpox and diseases, there was 1 million left. So that was in your book. I'm not sure which chapter. It might have been the next chapter, chapter 5. So this is chapter 4, Civil Liberties. Slavery definitely messed up. Segregation, we've definitely messed up. And the Sedition Acts are mentioned, 1798. John Adams was responsible for that, and that, is not a thing. You can't say that you can't say anything bad about the government. It tramples your freedom of speech. Okay, so I want to let you know about something about the Bill of Rights, and that is, they are the first 10 amendments in the Constitution. I really want us to read them just so that you know what they are. And it is in your appendix. Recently saw on the news that someone asked a reporter asked, someone that was at a at a rally or a protest or something like that, if they've read the Constitution and they said no, and they said, well, it's pretty short, that the reporter was saying that they read it, and the other person didn't believe them, but it is pretty short. It's in the back of your book, and it's something that I would like for us to do in class as well. So if you want to find it and go along, that's fine. I hate that you have to hear me read. Amendment 1, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religious or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Of religion, sorry, not religious, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Amendment 2. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Amendment 3. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, not in time of war, but in manner to be prescribed by law. So quarter means having soldiers stay in your house. They didn't want that to happen against your will, because they had it happen in the Revolutionary War. Amendment 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. No warrant shall be issued, but upon probable cause, supported by the oath of affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Amendment 5. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment of indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land of naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service, in time of war or public danger, nor shall any persons be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, which is double jeopardy, nor to be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, not to be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Amendment 5. This is not Amendment 6, sorry. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein that crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obvious witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Amendment number 7. In suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. Amendment number 8. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. Amendment 9. The enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Okay. And Amendment 10. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Okay. There you have it. All right, we're going to turn over to the PowerPoint at hand and go through that for Chapter 4, Civil Liberties. What did you think about the opening? What did you think about the opening story where police put a GPS tracker on Antone Jones' car without a warrant? What did you think about that? So, I mean, I love how these open with stories, and you're like, wow, how did that happen? You know, because the court said that that was illegal. You can tail someone, but you can't do that. And it is tricky with technology for sure. All right, I was going to read this by Thomas Jefferson, the quote beginning the chapter. A Bill of Rights is what the people are entitled to against every government on earth, general or particular, and what no just government should refuse or rest on inference. Okay, Thomas Jefferson. We were born on the same birthday, Thomas Jefferson and I. He's a lot older than I am. Okay, let's go ahead and switch this over to our PowerPoint. Oh, I'm too far down. Sorry about that. Let's go back to the beginning. And, oh no, I may have to pause it. I have, I'm so sorry. Here we go, chapter 4. There we are, Civil Liberties. Protecting individual rights. Okay, how the U.S. differs in civil liberties. 6 is most free and 1 is the least free. So you've got pretty, a lot of freedom. Canada, Japan. All right. Bill of Rights, the 14th Amendment, and selective incorporation. Civil liberties is a specific of individual rights, such as a right to fair trial, that are constitutionally protected against infringement by the government. Bill of Rights, the 10 amendments that list the rights the federal government is obliged to protect. 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause prevents the states from abridging individual rights. Supreme Court has engaged in selective incorporation, invoking the 14th Amendment to apply the Bill of Rights to states. The Supreme Court initially resisted invoking selective incorporation to protect the rights of the accused in the states, changed in the 1960s when the court began to assert and protect the rights of the accused. All right, here are some definitions that were in your book. Speech. You are free to say almost anything except that which is obscene, slanders another person, or has high probability of inciting others to take imminent lawless action. Press. You are free to write or publish almost anything except that which is obscene, libels another person, seriously endangers the military action or national security, or has a high probability of inciting others to take imminent lawless action. Assembly. You are free to assemble, although government may regulate the time and place for your reasons of public convenience and safety, provided such regulations are applied even-handedly to all groups. Religion. You are protected from having the religious beliefs of others imposed on you, and you are free to believe what you like. So I want to talk about 2 things really fast before we move on. One thing your book did cover was oftentimes there are laws, and I've had students say, oh, there's no racism in the United States, and that's absolutely false, because just because we have a law doesn't mean that it's carried out. Especially if you look after Reconstruction, there were laws, constitutional laws in the amendment. The 14th Amendment was enacted, and we had the Bill of Rights, but yet people, especially, newly freed slaves, African American men who were only allowed to vote at that time, they were kept from voting by having to pay a poll tax, which is absurd. Having to take a literacy test, which Rosa Parks took 3 times and failed it. And she had a college degree and was the secretary of the NAACP. So did she really fail a literacy test? No, she did not. Okay. And I think there was actually a literacy test example in there. Basically, they were taking constitutionally backed rights away from millions of blacks all the time until really until the 1960s again, because they had martial law, and then in 1877 the troops were removed, and then the voting of black men went from 85% to like 2%. And it was because of the Ku Klux Klan and intimidation and all these bogus laws. There's another point I was going to make. So just because a law is on the books doesn't mean it's enforced. Okay, that's up to the powers that be. We'd like to think and hope that people would enforce laws that we have, or make sure that we hand out those constitutional rights. But it doesn't always happen. Okay, and that's why we have other means to get to that. Okay. Oh, I lost my other train of thought. Darn it. So sorry. Okay, well, we'll just keep going. I wanted to hit on the laws. And Maybe it was freedom of speech. Oh, it did talk about how school children, well, even up until college, which I don't see that happening too often, but definitely high school and below don't have freedom of speech necessarily, because you have to, keep everyone safe and also not impede learning. Oh, maybe it was about libel or slander. I just lost my train of thought. So sorry. Well, we'll jump back to it. Absent-minded professor means something new these days. Okay. Speech press assembly. Seems like it had to do with something. We'll get it eventually, right? I'll remember. Freedom of expression is the most basic of democratic rights, but like all rights, it is not limited. Initially, the status of the right of free expression was uncertain. The Sedition Acts, which we talked about before, so John Adams really concocted those, and of course Thomas Jefferson was like, that's bogus and baloney. And it was, I believe the Sedition Acts were about speaking against the government or the president, and that you can do that. Okay, today freedom of expression is vigorously protected by the courts, but it cannot be denied if it endangers national security. Oh, that's what I was going to talk to you about. So I just heard that Germany has outlawed hate speech. So much of what we call freedom of expression or free speech is outlawed in Germany because of World War II and what it did, and sending millions to concentration camps, and so there are certain things here in America that you can say and do. The Ku Klux Klan would not be allowed in Germany, and that's what they were talking about on the news that I was watching, because there are laws enacted that you can't. You cannot hate a specific group for any reason. So, and you can't assemble to show that hatred. So I just wanted to pause, and what do you think about that? I would love to see the ramifications, because, outlawing hate doesn't sound like a bad idea. Of course, you would have to dig deeper. And we do have hate crime laws, but not speech. And your book really talked about that speech and committing a crime, or when it crosses that, is an offense that can be prosecuted. All right, let's go back. Espionage Act 1917. National security needs early in the Cold War and changes in the court's position in the 1950s. We do have some changes where they realize, hey, this is not constitutional and we thought it was before, maybe because of our own biases and prejudices. But, with time and progress and modernity, we see that it's different. Tests of government action to limit speech, clear and present danger, imminent lawless action. Oh, hate speech. Hate speech protected, but not hate crimes. That's what I was just talking about. Westboro Baptist Church protests, which are horrific. And there were pictures in your reading where they say, they go to soldiers' funerals and they say, God hates your soldier. We're glad your soldier's dead, which is just absolutely horrific. And it's funny because I've taught this before, because I want to show students that, there are terrorists here in America. And we need to acknowledge that before we, judge terrorists elsewhere. We need to realize and understand that we have it in our own country, so that we gauge it with the right kind of judgment, for sure. So I was trying to pull up Westboro Baptist, and I was teaching someplace, and it was blocked because it was a terrorist site. It was flagged as a terrorist site. You can get on there. There's a lot of awful things there. And what's so crazy is, I also teach world history and world religions. And, the message of Jesus was love and forgiveness and grace. And, oftentimes these terrorist groups take a religion and they make up stuff about it, because that's not the basis of Christianity, is to hate and say hateful things, obviously. Okay, so that was just a free little mini lecture there. Okay, symbolic speech, actions, not words, is protected, but less completely than verbal speech. Which one am I on? Okay, freedom to assembly, free of assembly. Some restrictions are allowed based on national security or disruptions to daily life. Governments can place time, place, manner of restrictions. Press freedom and libel law. So Pentagon Papers, these were papers that said that we were lied to about the Vietnam War. Wow, a lot of people lost their lives for that. And the prior restraint government prohibition of speech or publication before it occurs, extreme burden of proof on the government in that lawsuit. Publishing material that is falsely damages a person's reputation is libel. Slander, spoken words that are false, damage a person's reputation. So libel against public officials requires actual malice and knowing reckless disregard of truth. Which personally, I think if you print something that's not true, whether you meant to or not, you should at least, print something with the truth, especially in this day and age. Freedom of religion. Along with political expression, the First Amendment protects freedom of religion. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That doesn't mean that we are free to practice the religion that we want, like, oh, Christians can all be free. Actually, it's everybody. So, all religions. That's why, the Puritans came here. Because they wanted to have that freedom. And it is pretty crazy if you read about it, because it didn't take them long before they made up rules like if you don't come to church every Sunday, you can be stoned. So here they ran from religious persecution, and then they put persecution right back on people. So maybe you learn from that. Establishment clause, or lots of clauses in here. I thought they were pretty interesting, how they wrote about them. Great author for this political science book. Establishment clause, government may not favor one religion over another. Doctrines of wall of separation and accommodation. Court has frequently applied the lemon test. Policy must have non-religious purpose. Policy's principle or primary effect must be one that neither advances or inhibits religion, and policy must not foster an excessive government entanglement with religion. And one reason that religion and like prayer and Bible reading and that sort of thing is not in the schools, and it really mapped it out quite well in your book, I thought, is because children are so impressionable. And, I used to teach 7th grade, and we would talk about religions, and I would send the kids home, and I would say, ask your parents, what they believe and why. And then you can come and ask me. But I want to send them first back to their parents, because I believe that that's, the whole reason, why it isn't in the schools. And, there are prayers and, 10 commandments in a courtroom, that sort of thing. But, adults are not near as impressionable as children. And, if a child loves their 3rd grade teacher and they are one religion and their 3rd grade teacher is another one, and that 3rd grade teacher is sharing their religion to the point of proselytizing, that's kind of an unfair advantage on vulnerable children. So it did a great job, I thought, of talking about that. And I had a principal or a teacher say once, as long as there's tests in school, there's going to be prayers. You can't really keep them out. They're just going to be silent. I thought that was funny. Okay. Did we skip one? We got the lemon test. Free exercise clause. Government interference is allowed when the exercise of a religious belief conflicts with otherwise valid law. So Hobby Lobby, not wanting to purchase for their employees contraceptives. And the Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission. That was someone who wanted a cake made, and they were a gay couple, and the cake shop said They did not want to. So that's private. It's a private store, and they have the right to refuse. Creationism taught alongside the theory of evolution in public schools. That one was actually struck down because it is not considered a scientific theory. Americans' beliefs about the origins of life, which I thought was really interesting. I really liked looking at this. I thought it was pretty interesting. And, you know, I live in Cincinnati. The Creation Museum is very close by. So this is really kind of a, you know, a topic of conversation. The right to bear arms. Widely accepted view. Okay. The right to privacy, and it talked a lot about privacy in cell phones because that's considered part of your home necessarily, and you would really need a warrant for that. So I thought that was interesting how they're trying to categorize it. The Supreme Court is trying to categorize that. Right. Percentage agreeing with Roe versus Wade. Pro-life versus pro-choice. I do need to pause for a minute and just talk about what pro-life means. I was often given advice that was not actually true. Something you need to know, that if someone says that they are pro-choice, that doesn't mean that they are pro-abortion. It means they're pro-choice. It means they are pro for the person deciding. It's just really important to understand the delineation here, because I was given misinformation growing up, where it was like they like, you know, even to the point that saying that they are baby killers and that they like to. That's just absolutely not true and absurd. Okay, so pro-choice means just that they are pro giving the choice to the individual person. All right, procedural due process. Safeguards designed to protect a person from wrongful arrest, conviction, and punishment. Okay, Bill of Rights, a selected list of due process protections. We read these, 4th, 5th, and 6th, and 8th. Double jeopardy. You can't be tried twice for the same crime if the first trial results in an acquittal. Okay. Suspicion phase, unreasonable search and seizures. I thought that section was really interesting. Arrest phase, protection against self-incrimination. The Miranda rights, which I thought was super interesting because the man that they were named after, what was his name? It was listed in your book. Anyway, he was exonerated because they did not tell him or read him his rights. Ernesto Miranda. But was later convicted on other evidence. Okay, so he got off because he wasn't read his rights, but he was convicted. Trial phase, the right to a fair trial. States are not required to use grand juries, but it said 50% of them do. And federal courts have to. Okay. The right to a fair trial. Cruel and unusual punishment. Test considered whether or not it is disproportionate to the offense. Appeal, one chance usually. There is no constitutional guarantee of appeal, but the federal government and the states all allow at least one appeal. That is really interesting because I would kind of like to know like what states allow for more, because you often hear about, you know, someone who's appealing several times or one time. And what those perimeters are. Federal law bars a second federal appeal by a state prison inmate in most instances. Okay, Supreme Court ruling have affected police practices. Right, you're not allowed a racial profile. You have to read them their rights. The Miranda rights. Minorities are also more likely to be victims of police violence. You're not allowed to target individuals from minority groups. Tough sentencing policies are popular with voters, but prison overcrowding is an issue. The fact, if you look at graphs, and I believe there was a graph in your book, and maybe it's next. Yeah. The incarceration is out of control in the United States. All right. We saw on one of the first opening graphs that Japan had as many rights and freedoms as we do, and yet they don't have near as many people in jail per capita. And we have way too many. We have absolutely gone crazy. Cuba is second. Russia, okay? This is insanity. China, you guys. Canada, France, Great Britain, we're out of control with other, what we would call now developed nations, or first world nations is what they were called before. Our jails and prisons are way too full, okay? Really a problem if you study into that. That might be something you want to write your paper on. Okay, incarceration rates, the northern states, incarceration rates, and it's per 1,000 residents. And then, you see that the red is higher. Why do you think that is? It asks you some different questions. Is it because that is the Bible Belt? And, real heavy on, the judgment and the 10 Commandments? I don't know. But I know there's a problem, for sure. Rights in the war on terrorism. Japanese detention of Japanese Americans. We talked about that earlier. Japanese internment camps. Do you know how many Japanese were convicted terrorists trial by law from the Japanese internment camps? Absolutely zero. That's just embarrassing. So we just need to make sure that we go by the law and we, use the law and we give people a chance to that fair trial. Okay. After 9/11, people were held in Guantanamo without a trial. I guess what my thought process is when we're in class is I want to say to you, do you want to be held without a trial? Absolutely not. So, changing that, I understand that in times of war that there are different things that need to be done, but we just really need to be careful. Supreme Court ruled detainees have the right to challenge their Guantanamo Bay detention in the U.S. courts. And one thing about these terrorists is that they weren't able to know who brought it against them. Okay, which is really kind of scary. All right, surveillance of suspected terrorists, the U.S. Patriot Act, NSA. It kind of got out of control because they were actually listening to conversations of Angela Merkel. Okay, she is like the Chancellor of Germany. That is not cool. And that was in your book. And why, I'm not trying to say that I'm soft on terrorists or that's not a problem, but you have to understand, I teach world history too. At every time in US history, there isn't a time where someone is considered a terrorist that doesn't look like you or me. Okay, so you have the beginning. Native Americans were considered, the terrorists or bad guys. And then later on you have, Germans, or you have, just have all different kinds of people that are considered terrorists. And when you think about it, you want to make sure that if it's you, that your group, ethnic group is next, that you are being fair and protecting their rights lawfully. Okay, because so many times when we look at history, U.S. history in particular, that so many different groups have been deemed the terrorist of the time. So just want to be careful about that because you never know when it's going to be your group. Americans embrace freedom of expression as an abstract virtue. Americans favor limits to freedom of expression in particular instances. The judicial system has been the primary protector of individual rights. Critical thinking. All right. Distinguish between the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause, the First Amendment. To which one does the Lemon test apply? Assume that an individual has been arrested and is eventually brought to trial. Identify the procedural due process rights that the individual has at each step in the legal process. Okay, I think that's it. What is the process of selective incorporation and why it is important to the rights Americans have today? Okay, I think that is. I thought this was a long chapter, and I apologize. It's not really my fault, but I apologize. But it's really interestingly written. It's very well written and explains a lot of things about our government. This writer is incredible. So I just wanted to say, make sure you read it, make sure you take notes, and have a great night. Alrighty, thank you.